And this clip is going to have a good deal of grinding as well. For those who absolutely can't stand grinding, we're going to get back to normal speed at around the 18-minute mark of this clip. For those who don't mind the grinding, I hope my dialogue has kept things reasonably interesting as we wait for me to be satisfied with not only a fully evolved bug Pokemon that we're never going to actually use in Pokemon Red. There's also a bit of grinding I feel we need to do to prepare to face Brock and his still rather basic gym. Sure, it's just him and only one other trainer, but still. It's not like we crossed a river to find a bunch of water types to get here. And it's not like our Bulbasaur has managed to learn something that would be especially effective like Vine Whip just yet. We'd just be trading blows with literal stone walls. And probably be in the only set of circumstances where slow, draining moves like Poisoned and Leech Seed would give us an edge to win. And I do mean the absolutely only time that's ever going to be the case as far as I remember. I can't think of any other gym battle in this game or any of the others that slows things down to such a degree. Funnily enough, that's part of what I feel makes Brock feel special as the absolute first gym battle we go through in the entire franchise. And people who pick Squirtle at the start never get to deal with someone who legitimately manages to make the player feel like they kinda need to change things up from the usual constant tackle and scratch deal you had to do from the start. I don't know, maybe it's just me who has that particular relationship with Brock in the first generation. And I'm probably one of the few people who thought it was bad for Charmander to learn Steel Claw, a move that's super effective against Rock, just before reaching that gym in Fire Red and Leaf Green. I don't think that's a case of me being a purist and going, "You shouldn't have made any gameplay changes whatsoever." It feels more like a case of, sure, Generation 1 needed some more fine-tuning, and you've got the time in the remake to do a tune-up, but I don't think that making the actual fights easier to such a degree that a disadvantage becomes an easy sweep was the right way to go. Anyway, that does it for Gaban's Road to Beedrill. Now to get everyone into a level that is acceptable to take on Brock. Anyone else feel that 12 is a fair enough number for the first gym? Or am I over-leveling here? Yeah, definitely a lot quicker to deal with Kakuna when you aren't just throwing Poison Sting around. Probably wouldn't feel as satisfying to take one down that fast if we hadn't been slowed down by them earlier on in the previous clip. And it probably won't feel all that satisfying anymore by the time we're done with this last bit of grinding, but still, just kind of felt worth chuckling a bit over here. I mean, good God, that was a lot faster. Yeah, that Harden didn't stop this from being a two-strike fight. I know, not something to really be proud of. I just can't help chuckling at this sort of early game unintentional lesson that stat-changing moves are usually a waste of time when you should attack. Means I rarely, if ever, let a Pokemon keep stat-changing moves. Even stuff that's so good it's almost broken, like Double Team. I'm all offense, offense, offense. And in terms of a game story, there aren't too many moments in the mainline Pokemon games that really make me want to change up my tactics in any way, shape, or form. Of course, I guess I kind of feel that way in most role-player games anyway. For most of a game, I stick with a boring but practical way of fighting and don't really explore the various options when I'm dealing with something that is pretty damn easy. I just change things up, once I hit a wall. And frankly, most of the time that tends to be with bosses. And the mainline Pokemon games don't really have what I would consider bosses. Sure, you could call gym leaders and your rival bosses. They do test your skills at various checkpoints and all that. But they aren't all that different from the regular trainers you run into in terms of how they handle things. It's simply a matter of team size, level, and composition that sets them apart. And while capturing legendaries can be its own challenge, I feel awkward about stuffing demigods or outright gods into a PC box, or just absolutely crushing regular trainers with one of those legendaries. So I rarely ever bother with that aspect. Despite the amount of time and effort I just put into getting Beedrill, I'm probably never gonna actually use any kind of completionist mindset in any of these games. I'll, at best, just maybe do a little showcase of something that I like, but couldn't find it in me to actually use that much. And way too many of those legendaries are just fill the slots for sort of things for us to hunt down. Seriously, why would you want to hunt down the legendary birds in this game other than to just fill their slots on the Pokedex? And why is it you can only go after Mewtwo when the story is actually over? Either for bragging rights, which doesn't mean all that much to me, or to fill the Pokedex, which, in case you haven't noticed from all the times I've mentioned it, not much of a goal for me. It's not like we learn more about the world around us by going after them specifically. Most of what I know about those overpowered Pokemon from the first generation are things I saw in the movies. And I somehow doubt that the way the birds interacted in the second movie has any bearing to their attitude in the world of Pokemon Red or Blue. The idea of Pokemon being actually in charge of weather or some cosmic parts of the world weren't a thing until around the point they started finishing up the second generation and started to work on the third. Though I could be kinda misremembering things a bit. It's especially tough when so much is essentially a bunch of fan-like theories and ideas that permeated the internet that aren't explicitly mentioned in the games themselves, that I might have mistakenly decided, oh, now that's canon. Or they're things that were introduced outside of the mainline games, either via the side games or various other sources, because holy crap, Pokemon is such a massive moneymaker I can't keep track of everything they sell. Hell, there's also an issue with how the gym leaders are treated in the various media, and even from one game to the next. And in the fact that there doesn't really seem to be any actual government, as far as I can tell, just some vague sense that there might be a government since there are police and a free healthcare system, and as far as I can tell, no real nations in the Pokemon world, despite the occasional reference to real-world locations in some bits of the media, and Lieutenant Surge apparently going through a war. Yeah. Technically, those things aren't actually important, since it's technically a bunch of stories about some kid in a different region growing up to be amazing, either as a Pokemon champion or a ranger, or as some person transformed into a Pokemon or whatever. And those sort of background details become even less important when you step back and realize just how little the various regions actually interact with each other. The gym leaders in Kanto don't exactly take a weekend away every quarter of the year to have a conference with all the other gym leaders of the world. It's just one of those minor things that's itched at me the longer the series goes on, that we know surprisingly little about the world, despite seeing so many different Pokemon in it, seeing so many legendaries with rather major influences, and being in so many regions. Just one of those random things I occasionally think about when it comes to a franchise I grew up with, and as much crap as I may give Pokemon for not growing in some of the ways I feel it should have after all these years, at the same time I can't deny they haven't made the absolutely major missteps like StarCraft did with Heart of the Swarm, with their narratives. There's a difference between you had so much potential, and you're not trying to expand to grasp it all, just staying in your comfort zone sort of disappointment. And, dear God, you've clearly got no idea what you're working with, and just slapped some references together, and to try to hide how contrary to everything else this story is in this universe. Since we're just knocking out a bunch of various Pokemon, not slaughtering them, is there a reason so many are still willing to go up against us? I mean, sure, Pokemon in their own right are portrayed as enjoying fighting, but if a major fighter is treating all the locals as jobbers at some point, I'm pretty sure the locals aren't going to want to go up against that major fighter anymore. And sure, we have not actually earned our first gym badge just yet, but compared to the various bugs and old Pikachu in this forest, you may as well be taking Muhammad Ali in his prime, going one-on-one with some random drunken scrubs in a beer hall. Sooner or later, those scrubs are gonna get it into their heads that it's not fun to keep losing, and yeah, they stand no chance against this guy. Funnily enough, this would not feel like an issue to me if this was a world where we just slaughtered our enemies left and right. Instead, it's a world where death in combat is more of a rarity, to the point that 10-year-olds are allowed to just wander around unsupervised. Now, maybe this is just a case of me having different values than the game designers, because I was born and raised in America, but here in the United States, we don't trust kids to start driving until they're around 16 to 18. Cars are, after all, considered dangerous objects to both the driver and anyone who might be in the driver's path. Cars cannot do anywhere near the amount of damage that a Pokemon can. Add in various bits of ignorance that a kid just starting out can have, regardless of how good they were in school, and you have a recipe for quite a few different kinds of disasters. Granted, Pokemon in many of the portrayals have minds of their own and can choose to say no to their trainer or outright go off on their own. There is a method for just a crappy trainer kid to get stopped before he or she even starts doing something especially bad. But then you have the various criminal groups, and I'm partially kicking myself for starting to talk about them before we've even met the first and most iconic of them, Team Rocket. Still, for the most part, you got a good number of criminal organizations in this world that seem to crop up for pretty much any reason, even something as petty as, we want to cheer on this girl and screw over anyone who's trying to outdo her. The fact that there are so many criminal groups, and all too often the local police are either too slow or just not capable at all of handling them, in even the most basic of ways, just makes me feel like this fun adventure world is so obscenely lucky to not have a massive tragedies just happen at an obscene rate. I'm pretty sure the Pokemon God goes out of his damn way to make sure these horrific things don't actually happen. But then he wasn't even an idea on paper yet, until the 4th generation. So excuse me on holding off on most of the possible jokes about Arceus having a bunch of convenient avatars to defend the world from devastation in the realities where Ash isn't around to solve everything for him. We're still in the 1st generation here, and it'd feel even more awkward to start talking about the mythological Pokemon before those were even part of the series yet. Right, time for another visit to the Pokemon Center. I'm pretty sure the nurses there have got to see quite a few interesting people over the years. Though I doubt they ever really get to interact with the trainers of their patients, outside of maybe some small talk while said trainer is waiting for the Pokemon to be back in fighting shape again. Hell, it's not like I've ever had too much of a connection with the nurses who see me before I go to the dentist, or whatever other kind of doctor I've got to see that particular visit. But then it's not like I've ever had to see any given doctor multiple times per day. And great. Now part of me wants there to be some kind of game where you play as a Pokemon doctor of some kind. Sure, I've heard of Trauma Center series, though I've never actually sat down and tried any of those games for more than a very short spurts. So I've got no idea if that gimmick would really be anything amazing to work with. It's just one of the many thoughts that struck me as I was talking about the Pokemon hospitals. The other thought that came to the forefront involved me trying to sing Suicide is Painless, the theme for the MASH television show and movie. But I'm not that much of a singer, and it's not like the beat in the background music in this game could ever be confused for the beat of that particular song, so we'd just clash even further. Besides, even if there was a Pokemon Hospital sub-series or something, that wouldn't mean that Pokemon would have the same vibe as MASH anyway. I've seen a lot of shows with doctors, even military doctors, and none really grabbed me the way MASH did. This is literally just me spitballing to kill some more time for a while here. Definitely a good thing I'm not counting wild Pokemon in my Pokemon win scorecard. That would just make the overall wins for the generation seem downright insane. As a side note, I moved closer to Pewter City itself more because I was getting sick of seeing the same bit of forest than because I was getting sick of fighting against bugs. I'm pretty sure that one trainer in the forest is pretty glad we're no longer patrolling in front of him. Of course, if he wanted to catch or train any down there, he'd have done more than just stand around in one spot, but then I suppose we don't really care about any other trainers out here, just Jack, since he's our player character for this particular adventure. Oh yeah, Sand Attack was always an annoying move to have to deal with, but considering just how random hit rates could be anyway, and the fact that we missed before he got that first Sand Attack in, it's one of those hard to measure things, especially since it's not like you see the Pokemon stats compared to each other when we fight. Anyway, that does it for grinding. Time to start exploring Pewter City, then go up against the first gym. Well, since he's not going to be allowed to be a breeder like the anime went for, he's not going to be able to get into it as deeply as he possibly wants. I'm pretty sure any Pokemon that would give a damn about your repel wouldn't have gotten into your flower bed anyway. And he clearly doesn't give a damn about some random person he's never met just walking all over the flowers. So I'm pretty sure he's just spraying his money away there. I don't think the game gives the Pewter Police an actual building. And excuse me for laughing, that Team Rocket's first act of villainy in the game is something that's apparently been happening long enough that they could make signs on the road to said crime location. Though, I suppose, yeah, they also had the sign for the Pokedex before it even became a mass-produced item, so... Well, I've got no issue with exploring the museum in a bit. I just have to chuckle at the fact that the museum plays so little a role in this game, when it's been one of Pewter City's only points of interest, or at least a point of interest that's unique to it. I'm sure it is. Unfortunately, we have to look at the signs to see them. Also like the fact that they went out of their way to show outright skeletons of a few Pokemon in this game. Nice attention to detail there. Ah, bloody hell, Aerodactyl and Kabutops are both Pokemon that I like, but I've never bothered to actually put in any team in any of the generations I've ever played through. There are just too many above them in my list of favorites. Wait, so you can't scan and confirm if that's a Moonstone or not? It's something needed to make Pokemon evolve. You'd think they'd have some way to know that for sure. Ah, and now we're outright referencing real-world history. Granted, the American moon landing was quite the achievement of its time, even if it didn't lead to us building a moon base or anything like that anytime that century. It was essentially a very expensive propaganda stunt, because the United States didn't like the fact that Russia was gaining more clout for their space accomplishments at the time. Not saying it wasn't a major accomplishment, but that seems to be the only space-related things I ever hear anyone really saying they were excited for. Seriously, I rarely hear anything about Sputnik or Vostok. Also, a tad awkward these days that their model for a space shuttle is literally named the Columbia, which, granted, their accident didn't happen until after this game was made, but still, that did not age well at all. Especially since the destruction of the Columbia in 2003 led to no American shuttles being sent up into space until about the year 2020. Granted, first launched in 1981 and last in 2003, that's a pretty long time to use the same set of hardware, and while there most definitely needed to be some improvements, there was certainly something right about the overall design, or it wouldn't have gone into orbit and back 27 times in that time frame. Right, thank you for changing the subject to a hint that we're gonna be getting Magikarp once we're done in Pewter. Definitely an outright favorite, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stop myself from having one in my team in every generation. It's certainly going to be a struggle, and thankfully not a struggle I'm going to have to go through in the first generation. Well, there are very few things that are 100% sure. Much as I like the concept of moves that can only be taught by the trainer, I wasn't really a fan of the implementation until TMs became reusable. Well, even if it did sit, I don't think we'd be able to see it with those basic graphics. They couldn't even give Nidoran a distinct overworld sprite just yet. Well, this isn't a battle, so you shouldn't be having all that much trouble getting the little guy to do what you want. At least I'm assuming it's a male Nidoran. Maybe it's not listening because it's a girl and doesn't like being called a guy. Dear God, just how bad is the local batch of people challenging him if he outright has to send people out to find new, interesting challengers? He may be one of the more professional starting gym leaders in the franchise, but he's apparently also suffering from boredom. Hell, this isn't exactly a team that's pure anti-rock, but it should get the job done. As a side note, Nidoran learns Double Kick a lot later in the first generation than in the other games. Always kinda throws me off. Well, okay then, nameless guy with glasses. Take us up. I know this is our first bit of advice from this guy, but come on. I think we've pretty well gotten used to that particular way the lineup works before we even got to this city. Oh, I don't know. I feel like we've traveled pretty far so far. And he's just a few pixels off screen from your location. As a side note, I can't help finding it funny that the only other trainer in the rock gym has 2 ground types. Sure, part of that has to do with the fact that there aren't too many different rock types in the first generation, but still. I suppose at least it's not as bad as how the ice member of the Elite Four doesn't have 4 pure ice types either, but we'll see her when we get to her very late in the game. Right, let's see if this fight will let Kohaku match Mig's score. Again, it's not like we actually see the numbers for how badly Sand Attack is messing with our accuracy. It's just that our accuracy is being affected somehow. Sorry, Kohaku, but it doesn't look like you're gonna do much more for now. Nim, finish off this desert mole. Well, that Sandshrew certainly proved a bit more tanky than I was expecting. Still, after a bit of healing, I'm sure we can take on Brock himself. I thought you said darn because you just lost, and not because you got your pre-fight banter wrong. I'm not really sure that hot is really the word to use for Brock, regardless of incarnation. I mean, sure, the games tend to make him shirtless, but I don't really see too much of an appeal seeing the skinny man. Can any members of the audience confirm or deny that Brock is hot? It's not a major curiosity, but it'd still be worth a chuckle or two.